Eliza Boon lived in Dakota Territory in 1876. A woman carved from the same bone-dry soil her crops refused to grow in, widowed before she could remember being a wife. She lived alone on a dying patch of land outside a town that only remembered her when they needed something baked, stitched, or buried. He looked more shadow than man, eyes squinting against the sun, jaw clenched not in defiance but in resignation. The sheriff, bored and chewing tobacco, called it justice auctioning prisoners for labor to pay off their debts. It was over breakfast, her thick bread and watered-down stew between them. As the sun set, Eliza brought him a blanket and a tin cup of coffee. She didn't speak, and neither did he, but when their hands touched briefly, neither of them pulled away. "Why'd you buy me?" he asked, without looking up. She didn't stop kneading dough. One night, when the wind rattled the shutters and thunder rolled far off in the distance, he told her about the war, how he ran from it. A woman in Topeka remembered a man with a silver watch pawning jewelry. A constable in Dodge sent a report. Then, finally, the letter came. The killer had been caught, hanged in another county. When he reached the porch, he paused. "You bought me once," he said softly, eyes not quite meeting hers, "still willing to keep me." Jonah's name was cleared, the debt lifted. He ate slowly, as though tasting peace for the first time. After dinner, he found her father's fiddle in the attic and played a tune rough and aching but beautiful. She sat by the fire, her hands folded, her eyes distant but warm, and when the song ended, the silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt like home. How he lost his brother in a cornfield outside Gettysburg, and how the guilt never left. She said nothing, only poured him another cup and sat beside him until the storm passed. "Because no one else did," she said simply. "That all?" he asked. She paused, wiped her hands on her apron. "And because I know what it's like to be left behind." Jonah's crime, no one knew for sure. Something about theft, maybe violence, maybe both. No one asked. No one cared. The law didn't require details, only dollars. When Eliza passed the crowd, she caught his eye for a flicker of a second. That look, something between a plea and a dare, stopped her. Jonah ran into the flames without hesitation to save her mule. But her grip on the bandage told him she believed him. The roof collapsed behind him. He emerged, coughing, blistered, half carrying the animal by its bridle. Afterward, Eliza sat beside his bed for 3 days, dressing his burns with gentler hands than she thought she had. On the 4th night, as rain tapped the windows and the prairie sighed in relief, he told her everything. How he was falsely accused of murder in Kansas. How a sheriff, eager to appease a grieving town, threw him in jail without evidence. How the real killer, a drifter with a scar and a silver watch, disappeared after the crime. He told her about his sister, how he found her lifeless, her blood spelling out a name in desperate letters on the floorboards. No one listened. No one cared. She lifted her hand before her mind could catch up with her heart. A hush fell over the crowd. Then the gavel. Sold for $15, and the promise of room and board. Her hands were calloused, her back bent, her voice like a worn-out saddle strap, rough but dependable. The prairie didn't allow time for idle chatter or wasted breath. He chopped wood, she hauled water, he mended the fence, she repaired the chicken coop. They moved like two ghosts, haunting the same land. He dug a new well when the old one went sour, and she silently brought him water to drink when the blisters opened on his palms. She mended his shirts in the evenings, long after he had fallen asleep in the barn. In silence, something old and raw passed between them, a language of glances and small nods, forged from fatigue and necessity. Trust came slow, like spring after a cruel winter, uncertain but inevitable. She knew the language of silence and hard work better than any scripture. The prairie was unforgiving, and Eliza had stopped expecting kindness from it years ago. On the morning of the auction, she didn't go to town for company, gossip, or spectacle. She went for seed and oil, and maybe, if her coins stretched far enough, sugar. But what she bought instead was a man. Jonah McKenna stood in shackles outside the sheriff's office, blood dried like rust on his temple, bruises flowering down his ribs like some cruel form of art. He didn't speak for the first 3 days. She didn't ask questions. They worked. By the second month, when the days lengthened and the wind softened, he finally spoke. Jonah said nothing, but that night he stayed out late, chopping firewood until his shoulders trembled. Days passed, slow and sunburnt. Jonah began to hum while he worked. Eliza began making enough food for 2 without thinking. The night of the fire, lightning split the barn open like the wrath of God. Eliza didn't cry. The next week, she sold her wedding ring tucked away in a tea tin for 15 years to pay a lawyer to write to Kansas. Letters flew back and forth for weeks. He could leave. He packed at dawn. She baked bread. No words, just the silence of 2 people, afraid of what might break if anything was said too soon. She looked at him, her face unreadable. Then she nodded. He stepped inside, took off his hat, hung it by the door, and stayed. That night, she set 2 plates instead of 1.